episode of the show, and I'm joined today by not one but two guests. They are a dream team, and they do run their own podcast as well, the Fitness Podcast, and they are, well, we're going to get stuck into it, but these guys have their own individual stories of how they got into fitness and how they got into fitness podcasting, very similar to what I've told you guys about myself over the last year. So it's always interesting to see another person's perspective on how they got into it as well. So I'm joined by Jeremy and Zach of the Fitness Podcast. Guys, hello, how are you?
Doing great. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm probably colder than what you guys are. At this current moment. As you can see this, I mean, you guys will be listening on audio, but on video, I'm here in a hoodie, or sweat top perhaps, and a body warmer, and these guys are just in nice shirts and t-shirts. So that tells you everything you need to know about the differences.
I'm actually wearing shorts in New York City today, so.
Fantastic.
And I'm dripping in sweat because I just got out of the gym. So that may be the t-shirt excuse, I guess.
You've had a pre-pump first. You guys seen the weather in Europe? They're having an exceptional heat wave, and then if you have a look on the map, just completely misses the UK. Like we're not even there. It's like, nah, we don't want to go up there. Let's just let the Gulf Stream send a load of rain. So it's a nice, pleasant 16 degrees right now for the middle of summer, and that's amazing.
I was actually there 2 weeks ago, so it was wonderful.
Whereabouts was you?
I was in Northern Ireland for a little bit, and then I was down in Dublin.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, I'm half Irish, so some of my family originate in Cork, just south of a bit more south of Dublin. But I'd gone on holiday to the Canary Islands, so I completely missed this nice UK weather, and I came back to this. Now, I swear there was a tornado warning not too far away, actually, in my little town. There was genuine concerns that there might be a tornado. That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
But we digress. So, guys, just tell us a little bit about yourself, whether you want to go one first, or however you want to do it. Let's just let the listeners know a bit more about you guys and your story.
Sure. I'll go first. I think, I was born on a cold, rainy Tuesday. No, I'm just kidding. We won't go that far back. My name is Zach, and I grew up in a little bit of a rough childhood. I was in a foster home. I was taken away from my mother. Just very, very neglectful parenting, and then a lot of anxiety issues that came from that. So a lot of mental health issues that built and built and built until I was about 20, 22 years old. At which point I was like overeating everything. I was pretty close to 300 pounds. Just super unhealthy in both body and mind. I had a good brain in my head, which was, I think, my only saving grace. And I was able to get through college finally and get my first job, things like that. And I still was like kind of trying to work on the mental health issues, but I wasn't taking it too seriously at the time because I was able to compensate quite a bit. But again, still overeating, doing things I shouldn't be doing. And I got my first job out of college, and it was very interesting. I smoked cigarettes at the time, and I didn't want to smell like smoke when I went in for the interview. So I wore a nicotine patch, and I got the job, got hired, went to the first day, and my boss looked at me and was like, "Oh, you smoke. I would have never hired you if I'd known that." And I was like, that has nothing to do with my ability to do the job, but this is going to be a problem for my professional career. So I decided to quit smoking. And it was the hardest thing I ever did, but that was kind of my very first step into getting healthier, was that. And then like the next day after I quit smoking, they announced that the company was going to do a 5K running race like 9 months later. And I was like, oh, I can do that because they're going to let us leave early for work. And I was like, I want to leave early, just trying to plan that extra 2 hours, 9 months in advance. And
nothing to do with the joy of running for fun or anything. No,
nothing at all. And it was really like the social butterfly in me too. I wanted to like be around all the people that were doing it. So I went to a local gym that had an indoor track, and it was 9 laps per mile. So very, very short circle. And I ran around it once and like fell over and was gasping for breath and like wheezing and felt like I was going to die. And And that was kind of the beginning. And then the next day I was able to do 2, and the next day I did 3. And 9 months later, I ran the 5K. And then that Christmas, somebody got me one of those runner's belts where you can put goos and like little water bottles. And I'll never forget that day, because I was like, why does somebody give me this? I'm not a runner. Why would somebody give me this? This is for a runner. This is stupid. This isn't for me. And then I realized that I just ran a half marathon, and like the weight was starting to fall off. And the physical exercise was kind of the starting point for me. And then I was able to actually start to process some of the mental stuff and work on my anxiety, work on the depression, work on all of the mental anguish that I suffered for the first 20 years of my life. And that it just catapulted into like biohacking and trying all these different things. Most of it didn't work, but some of it did. And I kept those things. And along the way, I met Jeremy, who was starting his own journey in that realm as well. And, mid 30s, I was at a point where I was happier than I'd ever been, healthier than I'd ever been. And Jeremy and I started talking about, dealing with these mental struggles and, being dads, being husbands, being, bosses, being subordinates, like all these different things that men had to do. Yet nobody was talking about their emotions. Nobody was talking about their struggles. Nobody was talking about their mental health issues as men. And we started talking about these things together. And that really kind of lit a fire in both of us, because we weren't alone. So I guess one day I went to Jeremy and I was like, look, like you know how to podcast. We both know how to be vulnerable about our feelings. Why don't we jump on a podcast and talk about our feelings and talk about our emotions and try and make this a thing for men? And his answer to me was absolutely not. Hell no. You're crazy. Get out of here. And this is the point where I turn it over to Jeremy to tell his story.
Go on, Jeremy.
Yeah, so
I hope this is the same story. It's not. I want a crystal clear parallel story, but from an opposite standpoint.
Well, it was a cold Tuesday night. No, I also grew up with some trauma as a kid, but much more of the standard little T trauma that any kid of the '80s dealt with alcoholism in the family. Being a latchkey kid, very much left to your own. You're a Gen X kid, like. Pretty standard stuff, not the same, big T trauma stuff that Zach went through, but it made a mark, right? Like I learned to cope by shutting down, by being depressed, by staying out of the way, playing small, just don't add to the problem, right? Just stay out of the way. And I carried that with me my entire life. And that was just pretty much the way I lived until I became a dad. And this is typically the part of the story where a guy would say, and that's all it took to light a fire under my ass. And all of a sudden I, stepped up. But the fact is that wasn't enough. Being a dad wasn't enough for me to take my life seriously and to take responsibility for my own life. And so I just sort of continued to sort of live the same way. I tried to learn what it took to be a good dad and all those things. But it really was a knee injury that sent me to a physical therapist's office, where she said, listen, you're given your family history with knee problems and what you're going through right now, you're probably going to end up replacing both of your knees if you don't get on a bike. And I thought that was crazy, and there's no way I'm going to do that. I haven't ridden a bike since I was a kid, whatever. But I was talking to my brother about it, and he said, listen, all you have to do is decide you're that weird guy that rides his bike to work every day. Just make that choice, and you'll do it. And for whatever reason, the way he said it at that time in that place, I owned that identity immediately. I bought a bike that week, started biking to work. It was a 9-mile ride. And what I didn't realize was how much that ride forced me to be present in the moment. It took me out of all the regrets and feeling bad about all the choices I made in the past, and worries about the way work was going to go the next day, or worrying about that coworker, or worrying about being a good dad, worrying about all these other things in the future. I just had to be there in that moment to survive, and there was an incredible peace that came with that. And so I wanted to bring more of that to my life. So I went and actually found a therapist who taught me all about meditation and how to cultivate more of that presence in my life. And that was just the first door that opened up, another after another after another. And I'd already been doing a podcast for a long time, but it was very much, my brother, a friend of ours, we would just get drunk and tell ridiculous stories about our lives. And we loved it, and it was funny. But, as I started becoming more aware, becoming more, focused on my health, that lifestyle went away. And so that show went away because it just didn't fit who I was anymore. And that's the point where Zach said, hey, let's do a podcast about our feelings and what it takes to be, healthy people. And I was like, who's going to listen to us? What credentials do we have? There's nothing hanging on the wall saying that we know a thing or two about this. But I started listening to more shows in the genre and discovered that there's a lot of people that were just sharing their experience, and we could do that. And where there were knowledge gaps, we could fill them in with experts. And that was what it took for us to flip the switch, turn on the show, and here we are 5 years later talking to you about it.
I think one of the things that stood out to me about both you guys is when I had a listen to your show, the energy was very positive, quite, social, guys being guys type of thing. But actually, from what I read about you guys, the reason why it stood out to me is despite that, you had both similar situations or similar paths to myself. Again, my childhood was quite traumatic, and I went, I went through very similar situation to you guys, family problems and witnessing a lot of abuse and stuff. Yeah, I went through stuff that no child should go through, and that has been a driving force for myself. And I come across the same way as what you guys were on your show, quite, and I don't think I didn't get the impression that it was a cover up or anything. I got the impression, wow, here's two guys who, like myself, have been through the ringer and managed to find themselves, and this is who they are. This is what they love doing, and I was attracted to that pretty quickly. And also, mental health is something that, and I know you guys mentioned before, especially in men, is something that isn't talked about enough. And I'm glad you guys have done that, because you don't need to. I don't think anyone needs credentials to have a platform to talk about this stuff, because those that do have the credentials aren't talking about it. So that's why mental health, particularly in men, no matter whereabouts in the world, it's the same. Statistics, suicide rates are so high, particularly in men, because there is still this stigma. We can't talk about that. We can't. Or people like yourself go, oh, we shouldn't talk about it. We're not qualified. Nah, and I think that's why, to me, I'm like, yes, I've got to have a chat with these boys, because that's exactly what I'm about. And even though and the irony is, even though my audience tends to be women, but I do a lot of soul searching in myself and men as well, and a lot of my audience, even though my clientele tends to be women, a lot of my audience is guys. So the amount of times I've been out in town, and I've heard people who come up to me and go, oh, I was listening to your podcast the other day. They're all guys. And then I started to realise, you know what? Perhaps this is doing something. So I started leaning into that. I guess the same way as you guys did on your show. How did? I'll take it back to you, Zach, because I know you was on about you got to a point where the weight was you were nearly at 300 pounds, and cardio was obviously your first thought. Both of you kind of, especially you, Zach, you mentioned something to me before. About biohacking. I'm not too familiar, because I've always been very, very conservative when it comes to certain stuff like that. And I know it's much bigger in America than it is here. And I think that's probably because of the health service that we have here, and the kind of restrictions of stuff, and holistic approaches and stuff like that. Very, I don't want to say taboo, but they're not as widely accepted. However, my business partner, who I own a gym with here, he's very into it. So he has loads of certifications. I've had him on the show as well. He does a lot of activation. It started with, and now I sometimes walk in and he's tapping his body and stuff, and I'll say, well, what are you doing? And you guys are nodding. For those on audio, both of them are nodding, and he would be nodding if he's listening, which he does, because I catch he's swiping his head and stuff like that. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm asking my body what's wrong with it. Say again. It's like neurological stuff. But do you know what? There's been times where I've suffered with a bad rotator cuff, and he's stood me, and he started doing all these things, almost like Reiki in a way, that kind of thing, certain what he calls trigger points and stuff. And I'm like, I feel amazing. This is amazing. And he has a successful therapy business doing very much that. And of course, he gets clientele here again. NHS, they're a bit, So how did that? Was that what you tested on yourselves first, or?
Yeah, I think, like when we talk about biohacking and things like that. So I'm all about that. Like there's that old joke of like going to the doctor and saying, hey, my elbow hurts. And, when I do this, and the doctor goes, well, don't do that. 90% of the time, like what hurts or what's ailing us is like, it can be a different part of the body. It can be a different part of the energy that's flowing through your body. And I know it sounds woo and like mysterious, but like there is energy, like there is a life force that kind of flows through us and flows through the universe that we're all impacted by, magnetic fields, things like that. And we don't, we say we're not, but we are. And there's so many things, but I've gone through, myself personally, Jeremy's witnessed a good portion of it, but I was just really big on, what you put in your face is drugs. Like it's nutrients for your body, like whether it's broccoli or whether it's, some kind of like pill, like it's all impacting your body in the same way. And it was just my mind going, okay, so what's the ideal, like, ideal dosage of whatever I need to eat good for me. So there was a point in time, and again, difference in the health systems. I had a doctor who I could go into and say, so I read this medical journal. I read this study. I read this thing. I'd like you to prescribe me this, and I'd like to try it for 3 weeks. And she'd write me the prescription, and off I went. Even I won't mention her name because one of them was a controlled substance and she actually wrote it. But there was a point in time where I was like I had like a regimented diet, and I was eating certain things, and I was going every week and getting blood work and just seeing like where my levels were and seeing where everything was and just analyzing that data to find out what unique set of food and supplements and things like that I needed for like optimal, for my body to be totally optimal. And everyone's different, right? So you can't be like, hey, eat this and you're going to be healthy, because people are going to react differently to it. But there are ways to go through that without going through it the way I did it, right? You can, using a food journal and log your food and how you feel and things like that. So that's really like kind of where I started. And then I've taken it to the next step at this point where it's like, okay, now the biohacking is more about your mindset and like changing your neural pathways and a little bit more of the spiritual side of it. But I will say, like, my journey took 20 years with small incremental things that I did. So like it was just finally tuning the machine over the last 20 years to, again, I said it 5 years ago, but I'll say it again. I'm the happiest, healthiest version of myself ever, because I've kind of tuned the machine over the years and all through small steps. But that's what it is for me. It's really like questioning what you believe and like trying these things that sound impossible. Like 5 years ago, if you had mentioned, Reiki and chakras and energy flow and things like that, I would have been like, you're full of crap. No, like now I've questioned that belief. I've said, what if that's true? Let's try it. Let's look at it. Cold therapy was something I actually didn't believe in until I tried it and saw like the results and things like that. So it for me, biohacking and all these things has been such a long journey of small incremental changes. And these small incremental changes were usually asking myself if what I believed was right or wrong and being curious about it. And then ultimately being okay with being wrong, right? There's some beauty to being wrong. If you find out that something you've believed since you were a kid is actually wrong, and then you can change your behavior and you become a better person, amazing. It's such a wonderful thing. So that's a really long-winded answer to what I think you were trying to ask.
No, that was perfect. I think there is a rise in it, as you say, and I like you said, it took time. People want fixing; they want to fix very quickly, and that falls in all areas of life. But we know a lot of people, and I was quite guilty. I was quite naive to this. I was very I go where the hard proof, where the science is, and I would relate that to my audience and my clients. I know, and my business partner David would be like, "Oh, what's the danger?" The thing that I find interesting is that perhaps you agree is the only danger in things like Reiki and let's just call biohacking, which is a massive umbrella for many different types of therapies. We have reflexology here is growing as well. The only danger, the medical industry will say, "Oh, it's dangerous to believe that stuff without any evidence." What's dangerous about that when the medical science is just pushing drugs and helping the pharmaceutical companies make a boatload of money? That sounds to me more dangerous than someone opening their mind up to maybe some other kind of remedy. And that's what I've started to realise myself. There is my switch has flipped a little bit. So I digress a little bit, but the reason for this is my health has always been pretty genuinely tip top. Okay, I'm asthmatic, but I'm a fitness trainer, so I've kind of dealt with that. But a year ago, I caught COVID-19, of course, and I started to have neurological symptoms as a result very, very quickly. I thought this is strange, and I called my GP. Got no support, of course, on the phone. I was in bed, very unwell. I'm like, I'm having deja vu, and it's really extreme and really bizarre. And he was like, well, what do you mean deja vu? And I'm thinking, you're the guy who's had 9 to 10 years of medical experience. Why am I explaining to you what is an internationally known phenomenon? Anyway, so he told me to just keep writing it down and then come back. Anyway, it did disappear, and it disappeared for about 6 months, and I thought, that was bizarre. I never got over it. I was always like, what was that? Because I'm looking into the archives and I'm deep into peer research, and I cannot find this. And all I got brushed off with was, COVID's still very new, we don't know. And I'm thinking, this is not COVID. Anyway, they started happening again about January, started this year, and I was having very micro ones, and I started digging deep into it myself. And I'm currently waiting now for an appointment, but they've borderline told me what it is without official confirmation that I have epilepsy. Whether COVID caused it or COVID simply woke it up is unknown, and probably will know. There's some evidence to suggest I always had it, because I recently found out my grandfather's been to a neurologist for something similar. So then I was like, oh, hang on, perhaps it was always there. And there's things in my life, I mentioned trauma before, that makes me think, oh, perhaps it's always been there. Or perhaps this virus has just destroyed my hippocampus, whatever it is. But but that was a long response to your mentions that. But the point I'm getting at, I think, is that has given me a bit of hang on a minute, I've got to take my health a lot more. I was there thinking, I'm fit and healthy, I'm a fitness instructor, and I'm like, oh, hang on, now I may have a disability that could stop me from driving. I do have seizures. They're focal seizures, so I'm completely aware of it, but inside my brain and my body I'm having a rough time. And it happened at my work in the gym in front of people. They didn't know, they can't tell because I'm partially aware, but I knew. So it's made me now start looking into thinking, hang on a minute, all they're going to do is give me medication. That's all they're going to do. Mm-hmm. Anti-seizure medication, it may or may not work. I need to now start looking into... So, of course, I translated this to my business partner, David. So he tells me, go and take your shoes off, go and stand on the grass, do some earthing, grounding. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, do you know what? Okay, why not? And go out in the sun, get energy, draw energy. So it's made me wake up a little bit. And I guess similar to what you were saying before, Zach, your health was at a point where you're like, well, nothing else is working. Why not try this? And you just said something interesting there, picked up on, which is if I'd have 5 years ago, you were still the happiest. So in the last 5 years, you're still happy. That's interesting to me, because that's not something you had a quick fix, you dropped weight or got healthy and then reverted back. You haven't reverted back and you're still as happy, as you were 5 years ago. So there you go. Jeremy, I need to let you talk, my man, because it's been a back and forth love fest here between me and Zach, and I feel like you've not had your time.
Well, I mean, and I can just jump on what you guys are talking about there. You know, Zach was talking about some pretty extreme biohacking, right? We have the weekly blood tests, like the optimal performance, all of those things. To me, biohacking has always been just wondering, what can I do better, right? It doesn't have to be optimal. I don't have to like be operating at 110%. What can I do better today than I did yesterday? And that really, you know, I mentioned the bike incident, like that was the first door that was opened. I tried meditation. That made me curious about other things. Zach was losing a bunch of weight at the time, and I had plenty to lose. And so I said, "Man, how are you doing it?" And he told me the diet that he was using and how it was working for him. I incorporated it into my own style, and I dropped like 70 pounds in a few months, and it went great. But part of that was also along the way, I'd gotten in a bike crash and was given some pretty heavy drugs to deal with the pain. And man, they were amazing, which is why after a week I told the doctors, like, I literally can't take these or I will never stop. Like this, I need something else. So those went away, but it made me get curious. Like, okay, what else am I putting in my body? I was on antidepressants. I'd been on a bunch of different ones. They all worked great for a while and then they didn't. And so I stopped taking those, and then I stopped drinking. Like I kept getting more curious about what else can I change? What can I add? What can I subtract? And so to me, biohacking is all just about like, what can I change? What can I try a little bit different? So that's food. That's going to the gym first thing in the morning. That's, do I drink coffee first thing in the morning? Do I wait 2 hours? Like all these like little things you can do. And if you just wonder, like, why do I do this? Because it's a habit? Do I do it because it's what I saw my parents do as a kid? Is there something that I could try that would move the needle a little bit? And it's amazing. The littlest things will make such a huge difference. And it's almost always the simplest things. It's the journaling. It's just moving your body for 30 minutes a day. It's cleaning up your diet a little bit, getting the processed foods out, eating the stuff that grew out of the ground or walked on the ground. Like that to me is biohacking. You can go super extreme and put on the lab coats and try all the chemicals and all the different things. And you can get super woo woo. I'm all about the woo woo too, but I also want to bring this down to earth for people that are just like, God, I just feel like crap all the time and I don't want to. Start with where you are, measure what you're doing, and start wondering, get really curious. What can I add? What can I take away? And it's amazing how just making one change and seeing positive results will make you wonder, God, what else can I do differently?
Yeah. And I mean, it just happening from, you mentioned journaling, just happening from the mental standpoint. I think only now am I trying to mess about with my diet and stuff too, because of course, now I'm looking for what induces these seizures. And it could be completely random, but there has got to be something that is contributing. Caffeine. As a fitness professional, caffeine is top tier. It's almost like you can't qualify as a personal trainer unless you have a caffeine addiction. So, and that's probably because I get up at 4:45. I'm dealing with clients. I finish at 9:30, 10 o'clock, 11. I'm still talking to clients. So I guess that's just the what comes with the business. But the mental side, if we want to say biohacking from a mental perspective, I've been tapping on that for a while. And journaling, funny enough, you mentioned, for me, I've been talking about this on the show. I often say journaling can change your life and it can save you. And I strongly believe that. And from three guys who have openly admitted that the past life has not been great, particularly in the childhood, to come to where we are now and we're spreading messages on social media and as a podcast form, I believe, for me personally, if I didn't start doing that, and meditation as well, I've always struggled with meditation because I just don't have the attention span for me personally. So I always threw it away at first. Oh, no, it's all woo woo. I can't do 10 minutes. But what I find is my personal meditation. What I believe meditation is spiritual. I believe that spiritual peace with yourself is meditation, whatever that will be. For me, it was getting my diary out every day, and I would write. I did some work with a life coach. Shout out to a guy here in the UK called Paul Moore, and he introduced me to this on a very expensive course, but it stuck with me for years. And all I would do, very simple stuff, guys, is I would go, today I want to feel, and the key there is plan your feelings. Now, people will be like, what do you mean? What do you mean plan how you want to feel? How can I plan how I want to feel? I just feel. But that's not the case. You feel what you allow yourself to feel. So I thought, no, I don't like this. But I wrote down, okay, today, and he was like, it can't be happy. It can't be cliche terms. Go deep. What do you want to feel? So I don't know. Okay, I just want to feel at peace, or I just want to feel not angry all the time. And then the second sentence, and I do this every morning religiously now. But at first it was hard. Why do I want to feel this way? Oh, I don't know, because of this. Line 4, and there's only 4 lines every day. The third one is, okay, something I can, sorry, the third one, I do it so subconsciously, I can't even remember now, but it's basically how I plan to do. So it's what, why, how, basically, and then the fourth one is one thing I can look forward to today. And the reason I put that bit is there's something called a happiness buffet, which is a list of a minimum of 10 things, small or big, that make me feel good, that make me happy. And at first I'm like, I write down 3 or 4. Before I know it, that is now pretty much about 20 to 30 pages full of stuff. So that bottom thing, if I'm struggling with something that day, I will go through that little page. It could be something small. It could be a coffee. It could be a latte. And I'll go, I look forward to a latte today. Now, since I started doing that, gents, that's my form of meditation. And gratitude is the key word there, which could be a whole different podcast. But now, I realised it this year when it was like the word of the day, gratitude. And I look back through 2 weeks and it was gratitude every single day. I chose that word every single day. Why? Because it makes me feel good. And suddenly I started to see results in my business. I started to see results in my own health and my family life. And it was impacting everywhere. And I genuinely believe that was me healing myself from the inside. And it was all to do with the mind and journaling. So that was I guess I've not played about with many things yet. I'm going to, but as far as you were talking about with both your experiences, the mental side for me is definitely something that I have been toying with for a couple of years, and it's worked a treat.
It's like the old cliche, where attention goes, energy flows, right? So if you're focusing on gratitude, you're going to find a lot more. If you're focusing on how miserable your life is, you're going to find a lot more misery. So it's really your choice.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I talk to my daughter all the time when she's upset, and she's like, "Well, I feel upset right now," and I was like, "That's fair. That's valid. You're also choosing to be upset." Because she wouldn't let it go.
That's a hard pill to swallow, though, isn't it? When you say that to people, it's like,
it is.
Oh, you're upsetting me. No, I'm not upsetting you. The information you're encoding on your brain, you're choosing to let upset you. I could call you the most horrible word, but you're choosing to go, oh, that hurt me. The content was just words. It's just noise that came out of my mouth. You've chose to take in the context of that and then make it about yourself. And that was one of the hardest lessons I'd ever had to learn, which is, we kind of go back a little bit, mentioned about trauma. I was in a very bad place for many years because I was holding on to a lot of hating the world. Oh, this happened. My friends were having this great upbringing. They don't know what it was. And I've let go of that because of that mantra, that mentality of, I'm the one angry at the world, and I don't need to be. It's me. And I think that's the key word there, isn't it? Accountability. Yeah. People don't want to be accountable for their own feelings. It's much easier to go, I'm angry today. Everyone's pissing me off today. No, they're not. you are.
Yeah.
So I do agree. You said that saying, that where emotion flow, energy goes, and I think there was another third bit to that, but I can't remember. That was something I used to repeat daily. Guys, how did so you obviously knew each other, and Jeremy, you had some obviously background within the tech and the podcasting side. How did your show start then? Because I know you said before that no one was going to want to hear that, but obviously something drove you to do it, and then you launched it. So how did we get from there to where you are now?
Well, I mean, I worked in commercial radio for 20 years. I'd been podcasting. I actually started podcasting in 2004. So it was really, in my case, it was sort of a matter of swapping out the players and getting a new logo and a new brand, right? Like we had a studio in my radio station that I could record in. So Zach would pop over on his lunch break, or we would just, coordinate around our guest schedules, jump into a studio, hit record, and start publishing. So, it's kind of a boring answer, but that's really what it was, is that I had been doing it for so long that it was just a matter of like talking about different things that I now cared about, where before it was, fart jokes and embarrassing stories about how silly my life was. And I decided to sort of use that skill in a more beneficial way, I guess, for other people, because that's, the secret that nobody likes to talk about when you start these spiritual journeys, when you start trying to, take better care of yourself, is how incredibly lonely it gets really quickly, because the people you were running with are suddenly looking at you like, that's not going to work. What's wrong with that guy? What's that deal? Mm-hmm. Or suddenly or maybe it's not even judgmental. Maybe it's just, I don't even know how to hang out with that guy anymore, because he doesn't drink. He doesn't do the drugs. He doesn't, he's not funny like he was before, or whatever. You change. And so the people around you change, or at least their ability to hang with you. So it gets really lonely. And that was the thing that I think ultimately motivated me to agree with Zach that we should do this. And it's what keeps me going, is that feeling, because I still get it every now and then. Like that isolation just kicks in. I know so many of us struggle with it on a normal, in a normal situation, but when you go down this path, it's even more lonely. So I just wanted to be a couple of voices for people to make them, aware that there are other people that feel the same way. And there are lots of things you can do to try to manage that feeling.
Yeah. And I just want to put a little color on Jeremy's earlier statement of, as we got started, he worked in commercial radio, and it's a pretty boring story. It's pretty boring because he worked in commercial radio. Those of us who don't do that every day for a living, it was actually kind of a big deal. So fortunately, Jeremy we were able to put out a really good show that was like quality and polished, with the exception of me talking on it. And he also had like connections. So we got a couple of really, really, big guests in the health and wellness space, like right up front. So we got really lucky in that aspect. And so I say it definitely wasn't boring, because I think it was within like 2 months of starting the show, we were talking to Dave Asprey and then Sean T. Like,
I think they were like our 5th and 9th guests or something, like really early episodes for that.
So it wasn't really boring. I just want to highlight the fact that like our show kind of took off in the early stages because Jeremy had those connections and that knowledge and skill and all of those things. And I'm going to ask him for something, and I just want to butter him up, but no, I'm kidding. It wasn't boring. He definitely put a lot of effort into it, and his years of commercial radio experience really helped, the show launch successfully and keeping it going today.
So you have a lot of listeners now, I'm imagining, and has the flow of your content changed to adjust to the people that you're getting to, if you had people reach out to you and go, do you know what, guys, this is really helping me, has the initial direction of your show changed to what you originally set out for? Because I find mine has a little bit, so that's why I'm asking. Or have you always just kind of gone, no, look, this is the formula and people are really enjoying it, and we're keeping with that?
I think it's evolved over the years. We've gone through phases where the very beginning we were like, you know what, let's get people on here that we want to talk to, and then we'll gush our feelings and we'll get it out there. And then we went through a phase where, I think we're looking at money and we're like, let's figure out a way to monetize this. And then we had a reflection point where we're like, wait a minute. We started this because we wanted to help people and we wanted to talk to people and have it be an accountability tool for us. So we actually backed off of the money part and we started going back to that. And now it's, we talk to so many people and we look at so many different tools and books and things. We can't try them all. Like, we literally are incapable of doing it all. We talk about these small steps, yet we can't do 104 different things a year, to better our health. So now it's really just about trying to make sure we're putting ourselves in the place of where the listeners are and asking those questions that we think people would want to hear. and putting everything we can out there, because I know this has happened to us all, right? You hear a piece of information, it has zero impact on you. And then 3 years later, you hear the exact same piece of information and it has a massive impact on you. So that's kind of our goal these days, is really to just make sure we're putting as much out there as we can to impact people when and where they are. But at the same time, it's an accountability tool for both Jeremy and I to make sure that we're doing our foundational work. We can't go into every show complaining about how miserable we are. We have to go into shows, like, I'm good, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I'm right. So it's a good accountability tool. So we really started with one goal in mind. We kind of moved around all over the place, and now we're kind of back in this original goal. We'd love to monetize more, but we want to make sure that we're serving the audience as well as we can.
Yeah, I think I relate to that. Not so much from a podcast perspective, but in general, there was times where I kind of phased into, oh, hang on, if I go down this direction, I can monetize more, I can make more money. I'm kind of preferring the business side, and I almost lost sight of why I got into fitness to begin with, which was to help people. And I always told myself, if I was in it for the money, I would have chose a different career, But then things started picking up a bit, particularly after the pandemic. I'm like, oh, hang on, I have to go down this direction. And I kind of did the same. I come back, and now I'm back into the situation where I'm just helping people. I'm doing my podcast weekly. I give a lot of free information. Yeah, of course, I sell programs. I'm a business, but I don't push that on people. I do loads of free challenges. I do, a bit of charity work and stuff to try and get out there, go and do seminars and talks for free. And I think that's quite, you mentioned to come back full circle. I think I'm, like yourself, I'm happier for it because I'm doing it for the right reasons now. I've kind of gone to the point, I'm making business, and I kind of deviated a bit, and then I've kind of come back, and it's like, no, I'm back into fitness, and I'm searching deeper back into nutrition, and then with this potential neurological thing, I'm like, right, okay, I need to stop and assess my own health now, and I'm sharing my experiences. And yeah, I'm digressing, but I get what you mean by that full circle. And I caught something from you guys which was not said on this episode, but you have said, which is, I have a saying which I thought was my saying, right? But then I caught onto you guys, and you've stole my saying. And I tell you why. No, I tell you why. Because we're talking about motivation here, right? My saying, which it's been my mantra, which is motivation, okay, is created, not gifted. Yours says motivation doesn't show up; it's created. Now, I'm not going to sue, of course, but
we ain't got nothing. So good luck.
but I find that interesting that even on the other side, the other side of the pond, that's a very similar tagline, and I think that's just gives strength to how important what we were talking about is, that your feelings are created within. I go around saying this to all my clients in person, online. One of the big things I get, and it's like, I'm just not motivated. Mm-hmm. And I'm bashing my head against the wall because I've done so many of these courses and these soul searching and psychology. I'm like, no, you need to create that. I can't give that to you. It's one thing I can't do. And I imagine you guys feel the same. I can't get you out of this on your own. I can give you the tools and advice, but you've got to do it to yourself. And it's one of the hardest things of my job. One of the hardest. I wish I could just wave a magic wand and go, there you go, you're motivated now. Go and heal yourself spiritually, physically, mentally. There you go, you're a new person. But I can't. And the amount of people have come through my doors here online, they're getting somewhere 6 months, 12 months, and they've just gone. They've gone back. They've lost all motivation. I'm like, no, And I caught you guys mentioning something similar. Well, yeah, from a different, going at it at a different angle. Is that ideology come from your own experience, that motivation? Because you guys, you've had doubts where it's like, no one's going to want to listen to this podcast, and no one's going to take this seriously. And would that word, you reckon, motivation, be the big thing for you guys? That's kind of what's drove you to what you're 100%.
Doing now. It's whether it's the podcast, whether it's going to the gym, whether it's eating the right thing, whether it's, disciplining my kids the way I want to, or raising my kids the way I want to, like wanting to do the right thing, but I just don't feel like it. Like that's haunted me my entire life. Zach and I were literally just recording a show the other day because since the kids have been out of school, it's been really hard to get into the gym because my whole routine was built around drop them off at the bus stop, which is right outside the gym. So like I had an external reason to already be there. The hardest part of going to the gym is going to the gym. Once you get in the door, it's easy. So they were my reason to go. And once they didn't have to, suddenly we're staying up a little later watching movies. Suddenly we're sleeping in a little bit more. Now I got to get to work because I slept later than I should have, and I'll get around to it. A couple weeks goes by and all of a sudden I'm depressed again. I'm miserable. I'm feeling like crap. I'm like, well, duh, I'm not moving. Like, I'm waking up, my brain is racing because there's all this energy that's not moving. I'm going to bed, my brain is racing because there's all this energy that's not moving. And so, sort of waiting around for the right time isn't going to happen. You have to make the decision to do it. And there is a bit of a magic wand. It's not necessarily magical, but you have to know what motivates you. If you don't have it in you, if you don't have your 1 or 6 whys to get out of bed or to get off the couch and do whatever the thing is, you're not going to do it. If you need someone to text you at 6 o'clock in the morning and say, get your ass out of bed, find someone to text you at 6 o'clock in the morning and get your ass out of bed. Like, learn about, again, this gets back to what Zach started talking about earlier. Get really curious. What works for me? If I can't count on me, I got to count on someone else to help me out. So hire a coach, get a friend, get your partner, something, whatever it takes to reward you by appeasing them, if that's what it takes, do it. But I actually was having a conversation with one of my clients the other day, and she had a really interesting perspective on the why. Everyone talks about you got to have your why. I loved what she said because her point was one why is not enough. There are like 6 pillars of why. Is it money? Is it, career? Is it family? Is it love? Is it friendship? There has to be a pile of things so that the day that the money's not enough, or the day that the, respect of your peers is not enough, or the hug from your kid is not enough, there's 5 other whys you can look at and say, these are the other reasons why this is important to you. You have to build a mountain of evidence that proves you are who you say you are. And that's through developing your reason to do it and the tools it takes to accomplish it. And that's how motivation is built. Because laying on the couch, scrolling through social media and complaining on social media about feeling like crap all the time and saying, I'm going to start on Monday because I'm just not motivated today, is 100% never going to work. So you have to get really curious about what works for me. Why is this important to me? What are the tools I need to make it happen? And then once you start doing it, it's incredible how just once the machine starts rolling, it starts to run on its own. And that's what motivation is.
I love that. I've got nothing more to ask you after that. That's just. I think you've just answered everything that I would have possibly asked. In that, that was brilliant. I could probably just stick that on an audio book, and I'll be good. I'll be happy to go with that, Jeremy. Guys, what I would have loved to have done this for hours, but obviously with time restrictions we couldn't. I would love, though, to connect again because there was a lot more that we could have probably gone on about. Guys, I want to know a little bit more for my listeners about your podcast and where they can go and check that out. Go, shoot, where? Because I've already listened, but I'm going to be subscribing and downloading that. Because if it's anything like the gems I've heard from you two on this episode, I'm all for it. Sign me up. I'm in.
Yeah, well, I would just encourage you, if you're whatever podcast listener or whatever podcast player you're using to listen to this right now, jump over and hit subscribe on The Fitmess. Focus on the mess because this is not easy work. It's messy work. So The Fitmess is the show, and you can find it at thefitmess.com.
Brilliant. And what's in the plan for you guys now? You mentioned that you are, happy where you are. What's the next few years look like for you? What's the direction? What's next? What's the next journey?
Yeah, we're always kicking around. We've got a couple of books in the works that we've been, toiling away on. We would like to put together some sort of a course. We are considering some sort of group coaching program, things like that. I mean, that stuff's always been on the back burner, but the show is our passion. That's the thing that we love to do. And so it's sort of hard to take the energy away from that and put it into something like you were talking about like attaching business to it, because all of a sudden now it becomes this commodity. We're like trying to sell it. And so there's like kind of a dirty aspect to that we're still trying to land in a way that feels authentic and real and actually helpful, and not just another podcast selling another course that you'll consume 10% of and give up and try something else. We want to make sure that we're doing it right in a way that feeds our soul and helps our clients in a way that we think.
Is that the same with you, Zach, or has that already been decided?
Yeah. No, we've talked about it multiple times. That's pretty much it. We're like Jeremy said, where we had a little bit of a run where we're like, hey, we need to make some money on this. But at the end of the day, like we were just like, that's not the good feeling. That's not the good feeling for us. So we want to make sure we're doing it right. If we make a little money on the side, great. But we really want to just be able to impact people in the best way possible.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think there's any shame in making money on something that you're passionate about. But I think, like you said, as long as your core values remain, your principles remain the same, and that's a message I've always said to myself, and that's why I won't deviate. So I don't feel guilty taking money for what I do because I'm so passionate about it and I help people. But I've always told myself, as long as my core values remain the same and I don't deviate from that, then we're on to a winner. You know, 100%. Guys, brilliant. I'm sorry we couldn't talk for longer, but I would love to have you back on again and see how you guys are getting on. Make sure you go and head on and search for that, guys, in your podcast, whatever you're listening to, whether on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts are the main three, or whatever your podcast provider is. The Fitmess is what you're looking for. Okay, go and give them boys a subscribe and go and check them out. And same on mine. If you're listening, if you're new here, hit that follow button. And guys, what are your handles on social media?
You'll find us at Fitmess Guys on every major platform.
Brilliant. Instagram, Facebook. I know Threads is the new thing now. I'm kind of tapping into it a bit. I'm
having a little too much fun with Threads, so yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'm having a dabble. I've not really dived in yet, but that'll be the next thing I'm playing with a little bit. Guys, thank you very much for coming on and taking this time out. It is very much appreciated. I wish you the best of luck. Completely aligned with your core values. I love what I'm hearing, and I wish you the best, genuinely. I can't wait to see where you guys end up further down the line. And if you end up multimillionaires as a result, so be it.
We won't complain too much. We won't complain.
We'll take it.
Yeah. Just remember, make sure you give me 50% of that for stealing my motivation quote, and we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Okay. Thank you very much, guys. Take care, and all the best.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it.